Lansing embodies a unique history of automobiles, their manufacture, the people who sold them, the people who drove them. John Lorenz, a Lansing native, attended Michigan State College, was involved in the automobile world as the son and nephew of early Lorenz Brothers Buick dealership. He joins us today to share some of his observations of Lansing, automobiles, and their distributors then and now. John, could you share some of your earliest memories of the automobile business and your family's involvement?
Yes, I'd be pleased to. My father and my uncle started the car business in 1920. They were Franklin and white truck dealers. They were on North Grand Avenue. They rented a old livery stable to use as a dealership at that time. They sold gasoline and stored cars, realizing that you may question storing a car. What does that mean? Well, houses didn't have garages at that time, and people didn't drive their cars too much in the wintertime, so they needed someplace to keep them. And thus we stored cars at so much of them. I think we charged something like 50 cents a week, on that small amount. And then in 1923, they built a building which is still on North Grand Avenue, 315, and they were Franklin and Buick dealers at that time. And my first recollection is about 1931. I would have been 6 years old, and my father took me down to the dealership and walked me through and showed it to me. And one of the outstanding things that particular day, he and his brother had a brand new 1931 Buick, and they took me for a ride in it. And that was quite a thrill for me at that time. And I've been active in the dealership ever since.
Out of high school, out of college, you.
I spent 2 years. I started when I was 12 years old. We had gasoline pumps inside of our building, and I was in charge on weekends of the gasoline pumps, and was taught how to say good morning, sir, and taught how to greet people in that time. And then I spent 2 years in the Navy and a couple of years at MSU, and then I started working at the dealership. I vividly can remember my first car that I sold was a 1950 Buick. And I remember the process. I was up north with this car, and I ran to a man up there and said he'd like to buy it, and I didn't know what to do. So I called my dad, and my dad said, well, sell it. He said, you can't fall in love with these automobiles when you're in the car business. They're just commodities. And so I sold that car and delivered it to the man up north in that case. But and then I worked at all the different departments. I was a service writer. I didn't physically do any mechanical work or any body work, but I was and the major part of a car dealership is used cars. If you can't sell the used cars, you're in trouble. So I have worked in that division.
Were they on Grand at this time that you were?
Well, we were on Grand Avenue, and to be honest with you, in about 1932, my father couldn't make the payments on the building, so the Capital National Bank took it back, and we moved to the corner of Kalamazoo and River. There was a triangular-shaped building down there. That particular building at that time belonged to Frank Vandervoort. It was originally built as a Durant dealership, Durant's being made here in Lansing, of course. And then over the period of years, we built different buildings on River Street, and we owned a business on Grand Avenue. And but we've been Buick during our lifetime. We've had Buick, Pontiac, GMC truck. It's kind of interesting because they've combined those again today. But years ago, during the Depression, they couldn't find anybody to be a dealer at that time, so they moved them all together.
What was Grand Avenue like in those early days down there?
Well, Grand Avenue was, several businesses were on Grand Avenue. We were there. The city market was next door to where the fire station is today. Mm-hmm. There was the city gas plant was on Grand Avenue. Across from the State Journal was on Grand Avenue. Rio Retail was on Grand Avenue, and Thoman's Mill was on Grand Avenue, where they actually milled flour. I have a picture at home of some of our employees, and there's a bag of Moss Rose flour, which was the name of the flour that Thoman Mill milled.
Okay, all right. Then from Grand Avenue, you moved to?
We moved to Kalamazoo and River, and we stayed there, and we built. Then we bought another building up on Grand Avenue, and we that was our retail store up there. The Kalamazoo and River became the service department, and the showroom and everything were on Grand River. And then we also built a building on River Street across from our Kalamazoo River, and that was our used car building in that case.
What kind of a sales force did you have, or did it grow over the years, obviously? Yeah.
A great deal, yes. Car salesmen didn't travel a great deal. They stayed with pretty much with the product that they knew, but we had, I think at the most we had was about 5 salesmen at any one time between the used cars and the new cars. The car business has changed a great deal since then. May I recall a story that I can tell you?
Please do.
On a given, we ran 7 days a week back then. Sales, service department and everything. It was a 7-day business. And I happened to be in my father's office at the time, and a salesman came in and said that he had taken a man down to the warehouse to look at a car. And my father almost fired him on the spot, because he said, if you want to show a car in the warehouse, you bring it up. The theory was you didn't want this man to know that you had a warehouse full of cars, which meant they were distressed merchandise. So you kept them very, and you want to realize that when my father put me in responsibility, we ordered every car for everybody. We kept a few on the floor, but every car was ordered individually and was sold and was designed for each individual man. But now today, dealers have hundreds of cars. I was at the Buick dealer, and I think he had over 250 cars sitting on the ground in that case. But the public expects to see that many today.
What do you mean they were designed for a particular person?
Well, we would sit down with you as a salesperson, and you'd ask what model you wanted, and what equipment you wanted on it, and what color you wanted. And even sometimes, years and years ago, to the brand of tires that you wanted on it. That didn't last too long. That was a little trivial. But you didn't have to. Of course, the only accessories that we had at that time were heaters and radios. And yes, heaters were an option. I'll bore you with a cute little story that happened to me, and we were the closest dealer to Flint, 50 miles away, and people used to like to have a car that was made at Flint, and they would take the train or fly into Flint and pick up their car and start driving home. And they would get to our dealership that'd be the first place outside of town. And one day we had a convertible come in, and the man said the heater didn't work. And so we sent it to the mechanic, and the mechanic came down and said, the reason the heater won't work, it doesn't have one. Because the heaters were an option, and people in California didn't order heaters. So we had to order the parts and put the heater in this car. But getting back to your original statement, you could specify 2-door, 4-door, station wagon, estate wagon was a station wagon, and you could specify the colors that you wanted within the color brochure, and you could specify the upholstery that you wanted in that case. And did you want a heater, or did you not want a heater or a radio, or did you want white walls or black walls? And then we would send the order to Detroit, which is our headquarters, and Detroit would forward it up to Flint, and that car would be made specifically to come to our dealership.
Okay.
And when it came in, we called you, and it was a big occasion in that case. Okay.
What are some changes, or how do you see the automobile business in the city of Lansing today?
Well, I touched on that a moment ago, because today the public, when they decide to buy a car, they want it now. I can't imagine them waiting 30 days to buy a car. And thus, car dealers have to inventory huge amounts of cars on the ground. And the things that a lot of people don't realize, that those cars belong to the dealer, they don't belong to the factory. General Motors never made a car that wasn't sold. Every piece of merchandise that they make is sold to a dealer in that case. So, And years ago, as I gave you an explanation a few moments ago, you didn't want to have a lot of cars on them. It melts as your car wearing something.
There's a term for that, floor plan or inventory plan or something.
That's right. It's called floor plan.
Floor plan.
Floor planning.
I remember that.
We have, as a car dealer, we have the car can sit in our yard for 30 days before they'll start charging interest on it. And the whole thing is called floor plan. And sometimes the bank carries them, sometimes GMAC carries them, but they carry, and because we have a letter of credit with GMAC, and Buick Motor Division, in this case, just draws on that letter of credit. When the car rolls out the door, it belongs to you. It's your car.
Tell me a little bit about the Automobile Dealers Association. Is it local, state? Were you involved in that at all?
There are 3 stages. There's national, NADA. There's statewide, which was MADA, Michigan Auto Dealers Association, which still exists. And we used to call it LADA, Lansing Auto Dealers Association. And we were a very close-knit group of people. We met once a week. I was fortunate to be president of it one time. And we discussed business. We of course couldn't talk about prices or anything because that's price fixation, but we discussed employees and among ourselves to keep ourselves going. And frankly, at those monthly meetings, we weren't competitors, we were friends. Went back home and we'd cut each other's throat. But it was a very close-knit organization. Yes, ma'am.
Does it still exist, do you think?
MADA does. I don't think we have a Lansing Dealers Association anymore.
It would be helpful. But there's so many other dealerships.
Yeah. But we really, I'm serious. When I was president, we had luncheon meetings once a month. We had a secretary, and we threw it open for discussion, and everybody would talk about their employees and what their labor rates were and problems they were having with the factory or anything like that. And but as I repeat, when we left there, we'd go cut each other's throat for a deal.
Yeah. How do you see the future of Lansing in the automobile business? Do you have any thoughts on the future?
The dealers are getting bigger, and of course, we're in some unusual times of this now. I don't know. Yeah. It's hard to believe that a few days ago I drove out near the old Olds factory and to see it not there anymore is unusual. Lansing will have to develop some new sources because those people that work there and their sons work there and their grandsons work there, it isn't going to happen anymore. So I don't think, I don't know. But there'll always be some car dealers. You want to realize that cars don't have to be repaired anymore. There's very little service work to do on a car anymore. We used to do a 1,000-mile inspection and a 10,000-mile inspection and so on and so forth. But frankly, you can take any car that you buy today. They don't make a bad car. There's so much conversation about imports being better, and I don't believe that. They're good cars, but I think General Motors and Ford and Chrysler have made probably the best cars we've ever had. I lived through periods of times where we sometimes had to tow the cars off the trucks because they wouldn't run. And it didn't make it all bad, but that's why dealers were important then. But dealers today are only salespeople and people to store the cars. Very little mechanical work. Realize you don't change oil as frequently as we used to. We don't grease them anymore. They're so greatly improved, it's hard to believe.
It's an important observation. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your coming down and sharing your memory and some very valuable information about automobiles in Lansing.
I'm pleased to do it. Thank you.